Hello F11 members and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 51, April 2016. What I'd like to do with you here today is share with you some of the refinements I've discovered in Lightroom recently which make it much more functional and usable for image editing. I've been doing some research into the both the grad and the paintbrush tools and how to use them better. And I think I've made some really interesting discoveries. So what I'm going to do is talk through the post-production on this picture in front of you today. It's a shot going back a few years to Burma, one of my favorite pictures, I have to say. I'm going to do the post-production on this purely in Lightroom. When I did it originally, I was using layers in Photoshop, which achieved the end result very well. But of course, there are numerous ways to skin a cat, and I think this is a good example of just how functional both the grad tool and the paintbrush tool can be for making localized adjustments to both density and contrast. So on the left here, we have the picture, the raw, straight out of the camera, and on the right, the finished article. The picture was shot with a 17mm tilt and shift lens. I shot on the tripod. I set up my camera and I waited for this lady, this nun, to walk into the frame. And of course, as she walked into the frame, hit her mark here, I had the stroke of luck of this bird flying through the sky just in the right place at the right time. A remarkable stroke of luck. But you know what I always say, put yourself in the right place at the right time and you will get lucky. That certainly was the case in this instance. I think many people assume or suspect, shall we say, that I've dragged the bird and the nun in from different frames. But as you can see, this is a raw file that's been untouched straight out of the camera. I exposed for the highlights for the brightest part of the image there, and even using a 0.9 ND grad soft filter to hold back the top of the frame, there's a fair bit of contrast between the bright and the dark areas. And what I need to do is hold on to those bright highlight details in the sky, but I need to boost the darker shadow areas in the lower part of the frame. So how am I going to do that? Well, let's go back to where I started. I come down here and I press reset, and we're going to start working on the picture. Okay, as always, the first thing to do is sit back and consider. First thing I look at is, of course, the histogram, and up here the right arrow, which is of the histogram here, is illuminated. A red, telling me that I am clipping some highlights there. And if I just click on that little arrow, it shows me where. And it's in the brightest part of the spire here. Not really too much to worry about, but if I just move the highlight slider back a touch, I can bring those highlights, virtually all those clipping highlights, back into the fold. Don't need to give it much, and up here now that box is not illuminated and there's just the tiniest highlight clip in there in that spire. I'm not worried about that, so that's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is try and boost the shadows to get more detail in the lower part of the frame, and this works a bit up to a point, but in fact if I go all the way to +50, it's had its effect on the darkest areas of the image, but overall it's still too dingy. If I go all the way, it starts to look a bit, dare I say it, unusual, unrealistic. So I don't want to boost my shadows too much. What I want to do really is boost all of the tones in this lower part of the image. But it's quite difficult because of the composition. You know, we have some spires here in shade and others in sunshine. So I'm going to do this with a combination of both the grad tool and the adjustment brush. So first of all, I'm going to start with the grad tool, highlight that, and I've just put a nominal value of +50 on the exposure here. I can fine-tune this later, it's just a starting point really. And I'm now going to come down and holding the Shift key down to keep the grad applied level, move the grad in from the bottom like this. Okay, now I don't need to be too careful at the moment because of course I can grab this and move the grad tool around to where I want it to start and finish. So the start of the grad is here and the end of it is here. And it's adding, it's brightening the lower part of the image as is. And that's working pretty well, just from the start of the top of the nun's head there. But actually I can do better than that because I want to actually lighten some of these tones here in these dark spires here, which are also in shadow. So if I come down here and click on what says Show Selected Mask Overlay, this is showing me where the grad tool is being applied. The red is the area of the image that is affected. Now if I come up here to the brush section, and this dialog down here now appears, I can fine-tune that mask so that these adjustments are being applied to the areas I select with the brush tool. And interestingly enough, down here there's a new feature called Auto Mask. It's really useful. This has been, I'm really quite chuffed to have discovered this feature. So click on Auto Mask, click on the brush tool, and now I'm going to alter the size of my brush there. You can see the brush, it's got a little plus in it, meaning I'm going to be adding to the mask overlay. And now if I use my square bracket key to adjust the size of the brush, I'm now going to start painting in here so that I'm applying the mask to these shadowy areas here, which also need brightening. And the beauty of this is, this auto mask thing is that it detects these definable edges of the spires and will only apply the mask to within those areas. Really, really useful. So I'm going to come down on my brush size and paint up the spire, and can you see it's only selecting that area of the mask. This is so useful. Okay, come down onto my square brackets key, come up because I want to paint in here as well, brightening this area of the spires of the Shwedogan Pagoda. And all around here, all around here. You don't need to be too precious about it because what I'm going to show you is you can subsequently fine-tune this mask as well. So come down here and continue painting up until I get to the top of the shadow. And as you can see, I'm moving my adjustment brush over the edge there, but it's only affecting the place where the actual pagoda spire, not the blue of the sky. I'm up here as well. And now if I come back and just select a bit more, that's really quite neat, isn't it? Okay, so come down here and click off the selected mask overlay. And now you can see if I add adjustments here, it's brightening that area of the image quite nicely. How much? Well, I can fine tune this now. So I'm going to go about +50 on the exposure of the grad tool. And that's giving me a gradation here that is just not discernible. It looks natural. I'm quite pleased with that. I'm going to put a touch of contrast in there. And at this stage, that's done a good job. Let me just show you something else that's really quite neat. Let's go back to my brush and say, for example, that by mistake I've just gone a bit too far there. I deliberately go over the edge and apply a bit of the mask to an area of the blue that I didn't want to. I don't need to go back and start all again. I can come down here. I can click on the erase button there now, and now I can paint that back out. So you can be really, really quite controlled about where the mask is being applied to. Just to recap on that. So I've deliberately put in, I've gone by mistake too far over onto the blue sky. I make sure the erase down here is selected, and now I can paint that area of the mask back out again. Okay, let's just take that selected mask overlay off again, and let's go back to, I can now come down here, click on done, and let's see where we're at with this picture. Okay, on the left, starting point, on the right, where we've got to so far. It's pretty good, but we're not finished yet, because what I want, although this gradation here is nice, these tones here in the bottom, the shadowy areas of the spires is correct. The bottom third of the, bottom half of the picture, where the paving is and the none is still too dark. So in part 2, I'm going to carry on working on this picture, but use the adjustment brush to make further selective adjustments to brightness and contrast. I'll see you in part 2 in a few minutes. Thank you.